Hello everyone, welcome to Knowledge India once again. This is the next video in the series of AWS ECS. So we are talking about Elastic Container Service, and in this particular video we will try to understand what are tasks, what are services, and how do you create it. We'll understand about task definition. We will see and understand how do you put your containers behind a load balancer as well, right? Now, in the whole ECS service, there are a lot of concepts to understand. So we are trying to break it into logical chunks, and hence you will see number of videos coming which will be covering specific topics. So I request you to try and follow the playlist for which you will get the link in the description below, right? So in this particular video, what we will concentrate is that how do you go ahead and launch a cluster in the EC2 hosted mode. We have already covered in our previous video that there are two models, EC2 hosted and Fargate. So this one is about launching a cluster in the EC2 hosted model. And then how can you go ahead and create task definition and launch your tasks onto your cluster, right? So we will see that, understand, and then we will do all of this in our custom VPC, right? Uh, Also, I will show you that how can you go ahead and put your tasks behind a load balancer. We will go ahead and use application load balancer. And after that, we will see that you can go ahead and hit your application load balancer URL, and the service which is running in your container, that particular service will respond back. Okay, so let me quickly show you what are we trying to achieve here. As you can uh, so we are not gonna first launch things in public and then we'll say you can do it in private as well. From start, we will go ahead and we will launch things as it should be done in production. So we will go ahead and launch our instances in the private subnet. You are aware of this particular VPC structure. We have got a VPC 10.0.0.0/26. We have divided it into 4 subnets, 2 public and 2 private, spread across 2 availability zones, right? Now further to that, what we have done is we have put a NAT gateway just to, of course, allow traffic which is getting originated from private instances or our containers which are there on private instances to go to internet. So that's why we have got a NAT gateway, right? And what we will do in as we go ahead is we will launch application load balancer, which would sit in the in both the public subnets, right? So when we hit this application load balancer URL from our laptop, it receives the traffic and then it forwards the traffic to different containers which will be there on different EC2 instances. Please understand that when we are talking in this ECS language, whenever we say host for a particular container, right, we would mean the EC2 instances. I had explained this thing in the first video already, just want that you people should be clear. So from container perspective, whenever we say host, it is basically the machine where that container is existing or is running. So in our case, the containers are running on EC2 instances. Okay, so EC2 instance would be the host for that container. Now, I will talk to you more about this diagram as we move forward. There are a few more details which I would like to talk to you, but we will come back to this, right? So now let us go back to our console. As you can see, I'm there in my AWS console. Currently, there are no clusters running. I'm there in the ECS service. So first of all, what we will do, we will go ahead and create a cluster. But before doing that, let me just quickly show you our VPC. So as you can see, we have got a VPC and this VPC has got 4 subnets as I have already shown you in the diagram. That way it is there here. In terms of EC2 instances, we don't have any EC2 instance currently running. What I have done is I've just launched one Bastion host, basically a small Linux machine in the public subnet. So if you see here, I have launched a Bastion host. Why is it so? Because if I want to go ahead and do SSH into these instances, then I need to get into my VPC. So please understand there are certain prerequisites to this video. Uh, you need to, whatever you are seeing on this screen, you need to at least know what those components do. I would request you to please take a look at the description below, and if you have not understood certain topics in the prerequisites, the video links which are there, they would help you, right? So you can go ahead and watch those videos so that when you come back and see this, you will not be confused at any point of time. All right, now let us go here. So what we'll do, we'll now go ahead and first launch a cluster. So I'll say create cluster, and at this time we are going to launch a cluster which would comprise of Linux machines or Linux EC2 instances. So that's what I'm gonna select here, and then I will say the next step. Now let us give it some name. We'll call it cluster 001, and we want on-demand instances in our cluster, so that's what I'm selecting. You can also choose a spot. Then what type of EC2 instances should come up, right? So this is for demo. I will just pick something small, and let's say we will go for T3 medium. How many instances? I'll say 2 instances I want. Okay. You can of course keep it 4 or how many ever you want, right? And what will be the AMI of this instance which is getting launched? So you can choose between Amazon Linux 2 or Amazon Linux 1. Let's choose the latest one. How much storage should be there on every instance? Uh, you can choose to, of course, provide more, how much ever you like to keep. Do you want to attach any key? Yes, I'm attaching a key because I would want to actually log into these EC2 instances to show you something, right? So that's why I'm choosing a key. Next is, what about networking? So we don't want to create a new VPC, rather we have a VPC of our own within which we would like to launch, and in which subnet. So as I showed you in the diagram, we are going to launch these instances in the private subnet. So let me quickly select both the private ones. So I'll select both the private instances, both the private subnets here, and I'll say, okay, create a new security group, which will open port 80 on on the EC2 instances which are getting launched. Later on, we can go and of course modify that a bit, modify that as well. Now, here is one very important thing: container instance IAM role. So as you can see, if you are operating in your AWS account for the first time in ECS, you might have to create a new role, and AWS will create it for you, right? So what this particular role does is, if you'll go and see its definition, what it does is it gives right permissions to your EC2 instance, right? Who is going to assume this role? The EC2 instances are going to assume this role. These EC2 instances which are getting launched, they will assume this particular role. So after they assume the role, what would happen? There will be a ECS agent, right? An ECS agent is inbuilt into these instances. So with the help of ECS agent, uh, it the your instances are able to talk to AWS, right? Talk to AWS ECS service, and with the help of that, lot of things further happen. So for example, AWS service says instance one on, two Docker containers need to run on you. So that's what ECS agent facilitates, right? So basically ECS agent is required on your EC2 instances to carry on all the activities on your EC2 instance, basically creation of container, removal of container, and so many other things. So now if you know that from your EC2 instance, if it has to talk to any AWS service, a role is required, and that's why this particular role is there. Okay, if you want, you can give more tags as well, right? For your EC2 instances, it will get applied. And if you want, very recently, just I think 2-3 days back, this feature came, container insight. So now if you want at container level as well, you can go ahead and enable CloudWatch metrics. We will cover this in a separate video in detail. So we'll go ahead and say create. So when we say create, as you can see, a lot of things are happening at the back end. Two instances are getting launched, and please understand these two instances are not just getting launched simply just independently, rather they are getting launched uh, within an auto scaling group. That's the good thing, right? So in case something happens to one particular instance, it goes down, auto scaling will go ahead and launch another instance. That's a good thing. So we can go ahead and check quickly. Okay, so auto scaling group, as you can see, desired 2, number of instances launched 1. So more should be coming up. If we'll just give a minute, we'll have the instances up and running. Let us go ahead and refresh here. As you can see, 2 instances are coming up, right? Now, we can go ahead and here, we can go and look at our cluster in details. In the cluster, there are few things which we need to understand: services, tasks, and ECS instances. So it says one or more container instances are not running the latest version of the Amazon ECS container agent. So maybe the image which was specified there, on that image probably the latest one hasn't come. So that's okay. We can go to the EC2 instance always and update it, not a problem. Okay. Now come here, you can see that one instance has already started showing up. Now both are showing up. So these are the two instances which are part of my cluster, 820 and 765. As you can see, these are the two, 820 and 765, right? Now what I need to do is, currently if you see, two instances have come up, but of course there are no containers which are running on these instances. So next step what we will do is we want to go ahead and deploy certain containers on this, right? And of course there should be some purpose of running that container. So what we want to do, we want to run a web server in that particular container. So uh, first what we will do, we will go ahead and create something called task definition. If I press on new task definition, I will be able to choose whether it is of Fargate type or it is of EC2 hosted type. Currently, we are working on EC2 hosted type. I will cover Fargate again in a separate video. So we'll select this and we'll go ahead and press next. Before we go ahead, let's understand what task definition is. Task definition is basically nothing but, you can think of it like your uh, definition of your container. I mean, of course, it contains few more things as well, but it is more like the definition of your container. In this you specify that what should be the size of your container, what image should be used to launch your container, and all such things, right? There are a lot of parameters actually, uh, which you can specify in the task definition. And surely a detailed video is just required on all the attributes of task definition itself. So what we will do in this particular video is go through the essential ones, and we'll try to make sure that you understand the concept first, and then in one of the upcoming video we will go ahead and cover each and every attribute of task definition so that you are clear, right? If I just do that now, it will probably take 1 hour to cover all of that, right? So let us create a task definition. I am going to call this task definition as Nginx server, right? So Nginx is it's a web server, and that's what we are going to use in this. So the containers which will deploy on that Nginx will get installed, right? If you want to give any role to your task, or basically to your containers, you can go ahead and do that as well. When will you do it? Let's say if you are deploying a web application, right, which has to write to an S3 bucket, or it has to interact with DynamoDB, then surely it requires an IAM role. So you can create that, and here you can pass the same. Next is network mode. Now this is one very important one, okay? There are 4 types of things which you can see here. Out of this, the maximum used are Bridge and AWS VPC. Now Bridge is the traditional one which comes from the Docker side, right? And of course it is implemented in ECS as well. AWS VPC is something which is new, and comparatively new, I would say, and uh, kind of gives you a lot more flexibility. So I do plan to do a separate video on that to explain you the difference between bridge and AWS VPC mode. So please hold on to that. We will do it. For now, we will go ahead and use bridge mode to give you a short explanation now, so that you understand what you need to understand, that in bridge mode, what happens is you need to do a mapping between your host port and container port, right? So what do I mean with that? Let's say on this particular EC2 instance, which is there on the right hand side, I have got two containers in this diagram. Just assume it for with me for a moment. So I've got two containers, right? Now, of course, in this EC2 instance level, there will be one port which is, let's say, port 80, right? So I cannot go ahead and if I have to map a container port to this host port, I cannot map, uh, like two containers ports to the same port on EC2 instance. So what I'm trying to say here is, let's say on container 1, if I have Nginx running on port 80, and in container 2 also if I have Nginx running on port 80, I cannot go ahead and map both of these container ports to my EC2 instance port 80, right? That cannot be done because one-to-one mapping only is possible, right? So what you need to understand is, in case of bridge mode, the traffic, the traffic will first come and hit a particular port of your EC2 instance, and then to whichever container port that EC2 instance is mapped to, it will go there, right? So it will become more clear as we move forward, so don't worry here, and just try to follow along, and it should be easy. So we'll use bridge one, and right, so all this is fine. Now this next is task size. Now please understand, in one task there can be more than one containers as well. Suppose you want to run two functionalities and those two functionalities are two containers, you can go ahead and club them into a task, right? So a task, within a task you can have like one container or more than one containers. It's up to you. So for the overall, task, how much size do you want to specify? So you can go ahead and give that. So for example, let's say our thing is really small, so we can choose to, let's say, just give 400 MB of memory, for example, for my task. I'm gonna say that I want to give one virtual CPU to my task. Okay. Now, how to find out that what should be the correct values for these? Of course, you need to do some benchmarking in your development environment. With that, you can find out that what would be the right values for this. Now, the next important thing is container. We need to now give the container definition. So if you press on add container, you can now define the basically the name of your container. What do you want to call it? So I want to call it Nginx container, and you need to give the image name. So basically, um, when you say you put a slash, so before the slash is the name of the image, and then after slash is the version. So when we say latest, it is basically the latest version of that particular image, and this will get downloaded from the public Docker repository. Okay, we will also see later on that how can you go ahead and basically get an image from your private repository. So we'll talk about ECR service after a while, and we will see that how can you pick from something from your private repository as well. Next important thing is memory limits. For this particular container, how much memory limit, or meaning how much memory do you want it to consume? So there are two things here: hard limit and soft limit. It's quite easy to understand. You can choose to specify only one or both of it. If you are specifying both, then hard limit has to be more than soft limit. Hard limit is basically the value after which your container should not go, right? So basically, if it is consuming more than that, your container should be killed or it should be stopped. Whereas soft limit is something which is okay to consume, and that much capacity or that much memory is reserved for your container. So just an example, if I say soft limit, if I'm giving 250, this and hard I may choose to give, let's say, 350 for an example, right? Then here is the important thing, port mapping, which I was telling you. So when this container gets launched, I am saying, of course, Nginx is going to run on port 80, right? So here it would run, and this should map to which port on the host. Here, please understand, host means EC2 instance. So I may say that map it to port 80 of my EC2 instance, right? So this is where I was saying, now if on this EC2 instance only one container runs, then it is fine. Its port 80 can be mapped to the port 80 of the EC2 instance. But what if I want to run four? Or if I want to run three containers or two containers on this particular instance, then this logic will not work. So we will also cover that how can you solve such situation. But before that, first let us complete this flow so that we are comfortable with cluster. So this part is done. Other things you can just leave it as default for now. And as I said, we will come back and we'll cover each and every of these attributes. There are so many, guys. So we'll come back and cover this. So go ahead and say add. When you do this, the definition got added here. So if you want, you can also go ahead and add more containers as part of this task. Just I'll leave, I don't want to add more volumes, and I'll leave other parameters which are not mandatory as of now. So I'll go ahead and say create. So it created the task definition for me. Now next step is going back to my cluster. I would like to go ahead and run this task. And when I will run this task, I will run it on my cluster, and hence it will launch containers on my EC2 instances. So I will say run new task, choose the model EC2 and Nginx web server. Cluster is cluster 001. How many tasks? So I can go ahead and say one, or I can go ahead and say two. Try to think. So you guys already know that in our cluster there are two EC2 instances, right? For example, if you see, there are two EC2 instances in our cluster which are created. Now what would happen if I go ahead and here if I put as 4, what would happen? It will fail. Why? Because in our cluster, in our task definition, what have we said? Every container's port 80 has to be mapped to host port 80. When two containers come up first, their port mapping will happen successfully. But after that, for the next two containers, there won't be any available port, or basically the port 80 on instance is already consumed, right? And hence it will fail. So that's why in this case we can maximum launch only two tasks, because we have got two instances. So when we say two tasks we are launching, so basically two containers will come. One will come on one instance, one will come on another instance, right? So we will also cover in next one that how can you go ahead and solve this problem. That is very, very good stuff, okay? You can also go ahead and just, create a task group, just kind of grouping all the tasks which are getting launched in one time. You also have different options of spreading. So currently it will not make sense because we are only launching two. So of course one container will sit on each of the instance. But if you have got a lot of containers and you would want to decide or give a strategy that how do you want to spread it on to your number of instances. So that's where these placement templates come into picture, and I will explain you all of these as well in one of the upcoming videos. So go ahead and say run task. When you do this, now the task will start. As you can see, it is currently in pending state. It should come into running state. So guess what, guys? We just did a mistake here, right? Our task did not come up. Okay, fine. Let us find out what mistake have we done. So if I click on the task and I come here and see error response from daemon, pull access denied for this. Okay, so the way we have specified our image name, that is incorrect. It should be nginx:/latest. Sorry for that. Well, let's go ahead and learn something with that then. So we'll go to our task definition, go to Nginx web server, and we want to correct this. So select this and say create new revision. When you do that, you can come here and click on this container definition And here we will correct this. We'll put it like this. So it should be name of the image colon version. I'm sorry, I said slash earlier. So just quickly, let's say update, and it is easy. Just go ahead and say create. And with this, you can see next version of my task definition is created, right? So that's why it is Nginx web server colon 2. Now let's go to our cluster quickly. Here we'll go to tasks and we'll say run new task, EC2. We will select Nginx web server 2. I want number of tasks to be 2. Task group, let me just put TG1. We'll leave other things as it is and say run task. It should come up very quickly now, and we'll just refresh it. As you can see, it is there in the running state. So we did a small mistake, we learned something, and now you can see both of these tasks are there in the running state. We can also go ahead and see, if we go to ECS instances, we'll be able to see that both of the container instances, when we say container instances, it is just the EC2 instance, okay? So it has got one task running, and please understand, within a task there can be multiple containers. In our case, we have just kept one, but you can have more than one container definition within a task. So now what we should do, let us try to go ahead and pick the public IP of both of our instances and browse it. So we'll say copy, launch this. Okay, now this should not open up, right? Because my instances are there in the private subnet. What am I trying? So how would we be able to access this, the website running on the tool? What we'll now do is we'll go ahead and log into the Bastion host, and from there we will try to use the private IP of both the instances and check it. As you can see, this is my Bastion host. This is the public IP of it. I'm getting inside. Right, so I'm in. From here, I should be able to hit the private IP of both my instances, and I should be able to see the Nginx running on port 80. Some of you might be thinking that why is it that there is a public IP given to both of the private instances then? Well, even if it is given, it is useless. It would not work. And the second part is, why is it given? While we have defined our cluster definition, somewhere in that we have done this mistake. So we'll also go ahead and correct it later on, so that the instances do not get public IP when it is getting launched in the private subnet, right? I will show you that, so don't worry. Let us go ahead and do a curl on the private IP. So the private IP of first instance is this. I'll go ahead and do this way and enter. As you can see, the web page comes up, right? Okay, so we can also do curl and we can check for the second one, which is basically, here is the private IP, and we'll do this, and you can see this came up. So now we have Nginx running in containers on both the instance, but currently we have only one container running on both the EC2 instance. So meet us in the next video to go ahead and do more things, where we will be launching n number of containers on these two instances itself, and we will also show you how can we go ahead and dynamically bind ports of containers with the EC2 instances, and also this will automatically get updated to the load balancer as well. So a lot of exciting things. See you in the next video. Hey, thank you for watching that video on our channel Knowledge India. If you want to watch more such AWS videos, you can go ahead and check out our channel youtube.com/knowledgeindia. Subscribe to us to get notification of upcoming AWS videos. We've got 100 plus videos on AWS, and if you are looking to learn AWS in a simple, easy manner, I request you to go ahead and look at our playlist section and follow the playlist of your choice. We'll bring more very soon. Till then, bye-bye.